The supraspinatus is a part of the posterior muscle. So this is from the back. We have 3 in the back and 1 in the front. That one is the top one. It lies on the top. Remember when we started the scapula, we have a spine of the scapula, and then we have a supraspinous fossa and an infraspinous fossa, right? So this muscle is laying in the supraspinous fossa, and guess what? Supraspinatus muscle. So there's the word for it. So it's a supraspinous fossa and goes to the, and now we have, remember also when we talked about the humerus, we have these bumps. We have a bump, a big bump and a small bump. The big bump is sort of on the side, the small bump is a little more in the front. The big bump is the, see right here, the big bump is the greater tubercle, and then the small bump is the lesser tubercle. And so it goes right from here out and anchors it into this here. It stabilizes the shoulder joint. And this one is interesting. It helps abduction of the arm. So when you pull the arm out, you abduct it, you reach it up this way, right? You take this arm and reach it up this way. Am I boring you? Oh, that's good. We need some air, huh? Then the first abduction, the first few degrees, this muscle has to pull this arm back up here. And then afterwards, we have bigger muscles that come from up here, the whole shoulder blade area, and reach into the arm and can pull them up like that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But if those muscles right there are attached up here and they reach into this part, if they will contract when the arm is straight up and down, they would just slam the arm into the joint because they have too steep of an angle to contract and make it really move the arm up. So the first muscle has to do that. So if this muscle is torn, and that's often the case in a rotator cuff injury, it's usually this muscle that tears most. You cannot have that person pull the arm out as easily.
So they're not.
Yeah, they can take it. Once you take it to about this level, you help them, then they can take it because they can engage the bigger muscle.
Oh, yeah.
Make sense? So supraspinatus is a pretty cool one. And here are the trigger points for it. So then the next one is the one below. I guess what? Infraspinatus muscle lies in the infraspinous fossa. That's why I said you got to learn these things. And I'm trying not to give you too much excessive. That one starts infraspinous fossa and goes to, again, the greater tubercle of the humerus. And again, it stabilizes the shoulder joint, meaning it pulls the arm into the scapula. But it also rotates the humerus laterally. And you can visualize that, right? It's attached right here. It pulls on it. It turns that arm outward.
Yep.
So it pulls the palm out. All right? So when you bend your elbow and you have your palm go out and in, that stuff is actually done by the muscles up here.
Oh,
okay. Okay? And then brings us to the smaller cousin of the infraspinatus, and that's the teres minor. And that's attached here at the lateral border. That's the outside border. That's the vertebromedial border. That's the outside border, the lateral one. And it goes again into the greater tubercle of the humerus.
And the greatest tubercle of the humerus is the tip.
It's the tip.
The top.
Yeah, it's the tip in the back here. We're going to have the next muscle that shows us the other tip. So we have this bigger tip in the back, and then we have a smaller tip in the front.
Okay.
And so this, again, does the same thing as the infraspinatus. It stabilizes the joint, but it also pulls on it so it laterally rotates the arm to the hand to the outside. All right? And now we're going to the front of the shoulder blade, and that's the subscapularis. It's like a submarine is under the ocean water, right? The subscapularis is under the scapula. That's the name for it. That's why they have to come up with these weird names, so they have to be sort of creative, and now we have to learn the darn things. But at least we can make some sense of it, and hopefully it's goofy enough that we can make a cartoon in our head, and that helps us study. So that muscle is actually attached underneath here, the scapula. And it reaches into this smaller one here in the front. There's a smaller tubercle in the front. It's called the lesser tubercle of the humerus.
Yeah.
You can see it a little bit here. So this is the greater one up here, and the lesser one is here. And then in between, we also have a thing, and that's where the biceps goes in. That's your big muscle in the front of your arm, the one you can curl up. We'll go to that soon, okay? That's the macho muscle, one of the macho muscles. So subscapular fossa to the lesser tubercle of the humerus, and again it stabilizes the shoulder joint. It pulls it inward to the cavity. This one though, it doesn't turn the arm outward. This one turns the arm inward.
So like this.
Like, yeah, bring the hand across the chest when your elbow is bent. The pledge of allegiance. That's, well, yeah. I don't know all of that about that stuff. And here's your trigger point charts stuff. The trigger point logos. Okay, so this is actually interesting because this is the main mover, the main muscle that brings that arm across your chest. Okay. All right, so look at that. That was that. Rotator cuffs, the muscles that hold your arm into the shoulder. And this brings us to the next section. And here's a nice shot of the next section with all these arm muscles. We have the stuff that moves the arm around comes next. We have all of these with that. Okay? So we start with the upper arm movers. Move the humerus. We start with the pectoralis major. That's the other macho muscle. Yeah, that's the boob muscle. The one right, under the boob. That's the one that you can make nice and big, and you can, they contract it and they jump here. That's the one that do that with. So that one is attached to the ribs, to the, don't show off now, to the ribs, to the sternum, and to the clavicle. So you see, look at that, ribs and sternum and the clavicle.
Yeah,
it goes
very
around.
Clear
it's very clear. It's a beautiful muscle. It's a beautiful drawing too. And then it goes, look at that, it comes together and it concentrates and it anchors into the intertubercular groove of the humerus.
Wow.
That's now the thing between those little tubercles.
Wow.
Sometimes they call this the intertubercular sulcus or something like that. But when I first came to America, when you were not born yet, and I was learning massage, that was with Mom, and we were in this classroom, and there was 30 students in the classroom and something, and the woman said, this is the intertubercular groove, and I said, oh, and I'm like, but ma'am, I thought the groove is, we use that word in music. And so that's how I learned English, but, it worked out. It worked out. All right, I guess somebody came home and the dog was barking, but we're back in town. So that was the groove thing. So it goes to the intertubercular groove of the humerus. And when you consider this muscle contracting, it adducts the humerus and so forth, therefore the arm, and it medially rotates it. So adduction is you consider the arm being out here and it pulls it in, right? That's adduction. And medial rotation is you bring it, you turn your palm across the chest. It's not the main mover of that, but it helps the subscapularis doing that. So that's medial rotation. The next one that's underneath it that we can't really see if it's on top, if the pectoralis is laying there, is the Coracobrachialis. Now let's look at that name. Coraco.
The bird.
The bird. Coracoid. Process. To the brachium. When we studied brachium, when we studied the parts, the body part stuff, the upper arm is the brachium. So we got a bunch of muscles with brachium in it. As soon as you got that word brachium, you know it's an upper arm muscle. Right? There's one in the front, but I'll show you. It's also in the upper arm, really. And so that one goes from the coracoid to the shaft of the humerus. Right? And here's sort of on the other side of that big bump that you can feel when you go down with the muscle out here, the back out pocket muscle. So it's on the inside a little more. And what it does, it helps flex the arm. So it brings it up in the front, but it also can, so it brings it up, but it also can bring it inward. So it also helps with adduction. Okay? Coracobrachialis. Not the biggest one, but it's right there underneath the pec major. And then the deltoid, well, if you flip it up, it looks like a delta. Like you flip this forward, it looks like an inverted triangle. That's a delta. So it has 3 parts to it. That's your arm pocket muscle. So that's the one that attaches here at the spine of the scapula, the acromion, and then in the front at the clavicle. Similar to what muscle was that? The big one on top. The trapezius, right?
Oh,
yeah. I know, I'm talking a lot, so I'm sorry.
The shape one.
So it's the same as the trapezius insertion there, okay? And that one now, though, doesn't reach up and inward. It reaches out into the arm and goes into the outer side of the arm about mid-shaft down, which is the deltoid tuberosity. And you feel this roughage as you go down right there. And it kind of hurts a little bit sometimes. That's where that anchors in. And that muscle is the main function of it is bring the arms up like this lady does here.
Oh yeah, right? That's a normal weight exercise.
Yeah, exactly. So that's abduction, bringing it up, and that's the muscle that's the motion that the first portion, the muscle here underneath, does. Okay, it's laying underneath the supraspinatus. Actually, it's underneath here. Sorry, it's underneath here. This trapezius, and then the deltoid takes over when we're abducted about 30 degrees.
So you have to be careful with that exercise, not on your back.
Yeah, very good point. This is not necessarily a good exercise for the back. Do light weights with it, but make sure that low back here is curved and you bend out of the hip and not the low back. Do not curve it backwards. You stick out your butt, so to speak. Then you have a neutral back. All right? That's
hard
very
to
good
maintain, though.
It is, but it's important. And that brings us to the next mover of the upper arm, and that's the latissimus dorsi. And that's the swimmer's muscles. So that starts at look at that, the spinous processes of the thoracic spine and the lumbar spine, the iliac crest, and the thoracolumbar fascia, which we already talked about in the trunk. That's that whole white stuff back here. That's a big muscle. And it goes all here, attaches all here, and it anchors and feeds into the intertubercular groove of the humerus again.
Like a lower trapezius.
Yeah, it looks like a lower trapezius, right? And what it does, it brings the arm back. So when you bring the arm back, that's the muscle that pulls it, mostly. It brings it in also, it's adduction. And since the deltoid, the intertubercular groove is in the front, it medially rotates the hand or the arm when it pulls on it. So guess what? That's your freestyle.
Yep.
So look at this one. Look at this muscle. Look at this guy.
Oh my.
And then compare it to these guys. Yeah, this is Michael Phelps, right?
Oh yeah.
These are the other ones. These are huge. They are ginormous.
Yeah.
I know. I saw that. I'm like, I gotta put that up. Then you know what we're talking about. But the problem with this is heavy stuff. So he might be really fast, but he has to hold that stuff up. That's heavy meat. Yeah. It's not that easy either. So here's a trigger point chart for that. But that's the latissimus dorsi. And we have a little cousin to the latissimus dorsi. It's called the teres major. We had a teres minor, right?
Yep.
That's attached right here and goes up to this part.
The teres minor.
The teres minor. Now we have another one. We have a teres major that's attached here to the corner and reaches again into the intertubercular groove of the scapula. So it's posterior surface of the scapula at the inferior angle, that's called. And that's a little cousin and helper to the latissimus dorsi. So it extends. You can visualize that. Adduct brings the arm in and medially rotates the humerus. Pulls it because the intertubercular groove is in the front. So it pulls it inward, pulls the arm this way across the chest. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and now we get to the second macho muscle,